I never wanted to move into this house. From the moment I stepped inside, it felt wrong, like the walls were alive, watching me. At first, I brushed it off as paranoia, but on the third night, I heard it, a faint scratching sound coming from inside the walls. And that's when I realized I wasn't imagining it. When my family moved into the old farmhouse on the edge of town, we thought we'd found a bargain. It was bigger than any place we could have afforded, nestled away in the woods, with no neighbors for miles. My mom called it peaceful. I called it isolated. The first few days were uneventful. We unpacked boxes, painted rooms, and argued over where the furniture should go. It wasn't until the third night that things started to feel off. I was lying in bed when I heard it, a faint, rhythmic scratching sound coming from the wall behind my headboard. At first, I assumed it was mice. Old houses like this were bound to have pests, right? I knocked on the wall, hoping to scare whatever was away, but the scratching stopped immediately, too quickly, like it was listening. The next night, the scratching moved. It wasn't behind my headboard anymore. It was closer to the window, as though they were exploring. By the fifth night, the scratching had turned into full-blown knocking. My parents didn't believe me when I told them. My dad even joked about raccoons building a condo in the walls. But I knew better. This wasn't random. The noises were deliberate, methodical. Then one night, the whispering started. It was faint at first, barely audible over the creaking of the old house. But as the hours passed, it grew louder. My name, spoken softly over and over again like a chant. Elliot. I froze. The voice wasn't coming from outside my room. It was coming from inside the walls. The next morning, I convinced my dad to check the walls for animals. He reluctantly agreed, probably just to shut me up. He cut a small hole in the drywall near where I'd heard the noises. When he peeled back the plaster, we both froze. Inside the wall was a hollow space, no larger than a closet. And in that space, there was a chair. A small, child-sized chair, facing directly toward the hole my dad had just cut. There were no mice, no raccoons, no sign of any animals. Just that chair, and a lingering smell of mildew and something metallic. That night, the whispering got worse. I tried to drown it out with headphones, but I could still feel it, like hot breath on the back of my neck. I decided to record it. I set up my phone to capture the noises, hoping to prove to my parents that I wasn't crazy. When I played the recording back the next morning, I nearly dropped my phone. The whispers were there, clear as day, but they weren't just saying my name anymore. Get out, get out, get out. I played the recording for my mom, but she dismissed it as a prank. My dad, however, didn't say a word. He just stared at the phone, his face pale. Later that night, I found him sitting in the living room with a beer in his hand. He admitted he'd heard the noises too, but he hadn't wanted to scare me. He promised we'd leave if things got worse. Things got worse. The following night, I woke up to the sound of something heavy dragging across the floor. When I opened my eyes, I saw my dresser, my solid oak, impossible to move by herself dresser, standing in the middle of my room. The whispers came again, louder this time, overlapping voices all saying the same thing. Get out, get out, get out. We left the house the next day. My dad didn't argue. My mom tried to convince us to stay, but even she couldn't deny that something was wrong. A week later, we heard on the news that the house had burned down. The fire started in the walls, they said, caused by faulty wiring. But I know the truth. It wasn't faulty wiring. It was them. And sometimes, late at night, I still hear them whispering. We moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. It was cramped, with peeling wallpaper and thin walls, but it was safe. At least, that's what we thought. For a while, things were quiet. No scratching, no whispers, no strange occurrences. I almost started to believe it was over. Then one night, I heard it again. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but I knew that sound. My blood turned to ice as I stared at the wall next to my bed. This wasn't like before. The walls in the apartment were thin enough that I should have been able to hear a neighbor or even a mouse moving around. But this sounded deeper, like it was coming from somewhere far away. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I decided to tell my dad. He looked tired, his eyes sunken, as if he hadn't slept much either. When I mentioned the noise, he stiffened, his knuckles widening around the coffee mug. "I've heard it too," he admitted. My heart sank. I thought leaving the house would have ended it. Instead, it seemed like whatever was in those walls had followed us. That night, things escalated. I was in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. Then the whispers began again. "Elliot," this time, it wasn't coming from the walls. It was coming from the closet. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Slowly, I sat up, my eyes fixed on the closet door. It was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness visible through the crack. The voice came again, louder now. "Elliot, come closer." I wanted to scream, to run out of the room, but I couldn't move. Something was holding me in place, an invisible weight pressing down on my chest. The door creaked open wider, revealing nothing but pitch black inside. And then I saw it, two faint, glowing eyes staring back at me. I don't know how I broke free, but I managed to fling myself out of bed and bolt to my parents' room. I banged on the door until my dad threw it open, his face a mix of anger and fear. "It's in my room," I choked out. "It's in the closet." My dad didn't hesitate. He grabbed the baseball bat he kept by the bed and followed me back. When we opened the door, the room was empty. The closet door was shut, the air still. But I could feel it, that oppressive, heavy presence lingering in the room. "We're leaving," my dad said, his voice firm. "Pack your things." We spent the night at a motel. The next day, my dad started looking for help. Priests, paranormal investigators, anyone who might know what we were dealing with. Most people thought we were crazy, but eventually, we found someone who didn't. Her name was Marla, and she claimed to be a medium. When she walked into our apartment, she immediately stopped in the middle of the living room, her face pale. "It's not the house," she said. "It's you." "What do you mean?" I asked, my stomach sinking. She turned to me, her eyes sharp and serious. "Whatever this is, it's attached to you. It's been following you from place to place. Something you did or something you touched. Invited it in." My mind raced, trying to think of anything that could have triggered this. Then it hit me. The chair. The child-sized chair in the wall of the farmhouse. I told her about it, and her face darkened. "That wasn't just a chair," she said. "That was an anchor, a tether for whatever was trapped there." Marla said the entity had latched onto me when I disturbed its resting place. She explained that it wasn't just a spirit. It was something darker, something older. "I can try to banish it," she said, "but it won't be easy." That night, Marla performed a ritual in the apartment. She burned sage, chanted in a language I didn't recognize, and placed strange symbols around the room. The air grew thick, the temperature dropping until I could see my breath. And then it came. The walls began to shake, the lights flickering violently. A deep, guttural growl echoed through the room, so loud it felt like the floor would split open. "Do not move," Marla shouted. "No matter what you see, no matter what you hear, do not move." The growling turned into a deafening roar, and suddenly I saw it. The thing that had been haunting me. It crawled out of the shadows, its body twisted and wrong, like a spider with too many legs. Its eyes burned like coals, and its mouth stretched into an impossible grin. It lunged at me, but Marla threw something, a handful of black powder, that stopped it midair. The creature screamed, its body convulsing as it was dragged backward into the shadows. When it was over, the apartment was silent. The air felt lighter, the oppressive weight finally lifted. "It's gone," Marla said, her voice shaky. "But you need to be careful. If you ever disturb something like that again, it might not let go." We moved again after that, to a different city, far away from the farmhouse and the apartment. For a while, life returned to normal. But sometimes, late at night, I swear I can still hear it, the faintest sound of scratching in the walls. And I wonder, did we truly get rid of it? Or is it just waiting for the right moment to return?